Hello, and welcome back to the Let Me Add to That podcast. My name is Elizabeth Graswich, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Communications at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We are the largest regional education agency in the United States. We serve 80 school districts and nearly 2 million children. We are excited to use this platform to take a deep dive into the conversations surrounding our students and schools in LA County. This time of year can be pretty special, full of celebrations, family gatherings, and traditions that bring people together. But for many, this season can also be tough. The pressure to be joyful, financial stress, difficult relationships, or even just the change in routine can take a toll on our mental health. For some, it can feel isolating or overwhelming, especially when everyone else seems to be in the holiday spirit. Today, we're talking about mental health during the holidays and what it can look like for students, educators, and families, and how schools can help create supportive spaces during this time of year. Joining us are our two incredible guests. We have Kanchi Tate, Mental Health Program Manager with the Los Angeles Department of Mental Health. Welcome, Kanchi.
Hi.
And we have Kim Griffin Esperon, who is our Project Director 3 with LACOE's Mental Health and School Counseling Unit. Welcome, Kim.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So we thought we'd just start off with kind of painting the picture of what it's like at schools this time of year. What are you seeing and feeling as you walk through our campuses? What's that experience like?
Well, I think for many of us, when we walk through a school, the first thing we notice is excitement. There's all these holiday decorations or advertisement for events that are coming up. Kids are excited about their favorite holiday foods and maybe gift exchanges and classroom parties, all these things. So when we first stroll through, that's what we first see. And I think one of the things we have to be careful of is that not all students are feeling that way in our communities and in our schools. So for some of them, it's a really difficult time. And sometimes all those reminders in the hallways and the decorations can actually be a little bit difficult for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Kim. I also think, the students are looking forward to the holidays, but also it's like testing and finals and the stressors that come along with that also adds to. So definitely we see kind of like a range of emotions from like happy, joyful to like tired and maybe agitated at times or having you're like tearful for no reason sometimes. And it's like, what's going on with me? So we do see a range of excitement to like some sadness, stressors in our school communities during this time.
Yeah, it's interesting that the term holiday stress, I think we often associate with adults, right? Like parents who are shopping for holidays or dealing with like family vacations or family trips or getting gifts or, cooking, all those things, right? We think of that. But it also lands on students. And so, and obviously we serve a wide range of grades and ages. So what does that look like maybe different for a 10-year-old versus a 16-year-old?
Well, I think for our educators and our caretakers, it's really important to know your student or your child, because not everybody's going to respond in the same way to stress. So you could see a younger child that may be more having physical symptoms like, oh, my stomach hurts, or I'm not feeling well, or even just clinging behavior around, reacting to stress, but I always go back to like know their baseline, know like when something is off, like if they're sleeping more or maybe they're eating more than usual, you might want to have a conversation, like be curious and ask questions. And for our youth, our youth are trying to fit in, and so they might be gravitating more towards like their peers and wanting some, time to be with them as well. So the stressors might look a little different for our youth. They might use humor to kind of, shrug it off. Or you could see, sometimes they may be withdrawing and that's not part of their baseline. So just really knowing your child and your student.
And I think sometimes we don't think of our children as having holiday stress. I think, we think, oh, you're having a class party. Like, that's not stressful. You're going to get gifts. That's not stressful. But when we really start to look at our students, we realize that for our younger students, they might just have so much stimulation going on, like they're overstimulated, right? They're too much is going on at school, too much is going on at home. And so this really impacts their ability to sleep, to regulate themselves, to express even what they're feeling, especially if this is a child that maybe things aren't going as happily at home as it is for some of the other students. And then for our older kids, they may be much more aware of some of the struggles that their families are having. So particularly this December, this could be a very difficult December for some of our students. We are in a time right now where our families are struggling to obtain food, for example, the basics, right? A younger student may not be as aware, but our older student may be very aware of these struggles that their families are having, and they may even be responsible for earning money for their family to pay for food. And as mentioned, like for teens, that social awareness is so critical. And with social media right now, which is full of pictures and images and stories of these perfect holidays, right? What does a perfect holiday look like? How should you dress? What kind of gifts should you receive? This can be very stressful for a child who maybe doesn't even celebrate that holiday or sees all their peers excited about it, but they know that they're not for whatever reason, any number of reasons, they may not be celebrating that holiday or may not be having that same experience. So they experience something called upward social comparison, which is so difficult for our teens to cope with sometimes. So just like our youth, they can be very irritable, they can be moody, they can have academic struggles, and it can come out in different ways for different kids.
It's really interesting because as, schools are trying to celebrate the time of the year and bring joy, and, I know that's the best intention. You're right. The students could be having different experiences. And so how do educators, or how can they navigate that?
I think teachers, educators need to be aware that, there's so many different cultures, ethnicities, races in our school, and being mindful that not everybody celebrates Christmas. Maybe they're celebrating something different. And what does that celebration look like for that each unique student and their family could be very different. Even if they spend Christmas together or not, it will look very different. So really, I would say really looking at the larger concept or the themes of what does holidays mean? It's a time of kindness, time of being grateful, and spending time with, family members, friends that bring you joy. I think highlighting those things versus just honing in on a holiday. That's just my perspective.
I agree 100%. It's inclusivity through belonging, not uniformity, right? So we are acknowledging that some students don't celebrate holidays at all during their winter break or during the month of December. It is a time where they could, though, celebrate common themes, like you mentioned. It's also a time where they can talk about cultural diversity, right? And traditions from around the world, and allow students to come in and share whatever their traditions are. Because that will really give them the opportunity to have their voice heard and to share something with others that they may not know. And so this really can help build their own, their sense of self when they're allowed to express themselves this way. And then to allow them to share maybe that they don't want to participate in an event, or they don't want to share about a tradition, and acknowledge that that's okay too.
Yeah, you know what I love about this conversation is, we talk so much on this show about, belonging at schools and making students feel welcome, and, that when students have connections on a school campus, how it's just a better experience for them, and then all the other, academic indicators kind of follow, right? And so, grasping into this and thinking of it as an opportunity to connect and build relationships, that's like a really beautiful approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an opportunity to build community within such a diverse community, right? And to learn from each other, to be curious and celebrate each other.
I think sometimes we forget that acknowledging each other's differences actually does help to build connections, rather than just assuming that we are all the same.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things about LA, right? Is how diverse we are in LA County.
Yeah.
So it's really a great opportunity. We've talked about this a little bit already, but just to dig into it a little bit more, how do the stressors that we see this time of year, like family dynamics, financial strain, social isolation, show up in our communities? Not just our school communities, but like our communities in general, but then they affect our communities.
So I think, when we look at our school communities and then our larger communities that they're part of, there's a lot of stressors happening right now in our communities. Yeah. A lot of people are in pain. Families are torn apart. And there's a lot of sadness and grief in our communities. And it could impact our students in so many different ways, from them wanting to just isolate, not go to school. Some may be tired. Because, as Kim mentioned, maybe they are working and they have to take on another shift. And, being distracted as well, because they're navigating so many highs and lows, and a lot of anger, too, out there right now. I would say a lot of ups and downs within our communities right now.
I absolutely agree. This has been a big year for LA County students. The wildfires were less than a year ago. So for our students who were directly or even indirectly impacted by those fires, they may be having stress about not having the normal traditions that they usually have experienced around this time of year. Or they may have moved and have had social connections severed, or at least made more difficult due to this. And then, of course, as mentioned, family separation due to immigration enforcement, and or even students in foster care, right? Not knowing what is their holiday going to look like. So I think for these students, they may sometimes appear on the outside as okay even, right? Sometimes, but on the inside, they may not feel so okay. So when we think about stressors, we have to be very mindful of the different experiences that our students and their families have experienced and are going through, so we can really increase our awareness and provide support to these kids.
And so stressors for kids, they often show up, as you've mentioned, like in visible ways, right? I would imagine from a teacher standpoint that sometimes it's challenging to figure out, when is a student just having a bad day and, when is something more serious going on? How do they navigate that? What can they look for?
I would say, just kind of going back to our first question that we talked about, is knowing your students, right? Knowing their behaviors. And when you notice changes in those behaviors and actually the patterns, right? So if it's a student who is really engaged during the school year, but all of a sudden you see them disengage and being really quiet, or a student who may be acting out in class most of the time, or asking to go to the restroom, and not all of a sudden you see them with their head down, and it's a pattern. I think really understanding your students, and I think it is a hard job for our educators because you have so many students, depending on, elementary, middle school, that you kind of high school, you have to kind of monitor and oversee. So we're also asking our educators a lot as well. So I would say to our educators, reach out to your mental health teams. Pull them in, ask them questions, bring them into your class so that you can share about, what does stressors look like during the holidays? So you in some ways normalize some of this for your students, and you don't have to be the only one taking it on.
I think I would add for our educators to trust their instincts because they do know their students, right? And they may not be thinking, oh, that student is acting like this little differently. It just might be more of like this gut feeling that something's wrong with their student, because the truth is they often are the first one to notice that something is wrong. So it's better to overreact than to miss something, because no student will be upset if a teacher just checks in with them, right? And says, how are you doing? I've noticed you seem a little different lately. Anything I can help you with? And the students appreciate that.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And also the fact that, at least at this time of year, they've had the students for a few months. So they've been around them, they've experienced them. So you're right. They do know their students. It's one of the beautiful things about school, right? Yeah. And students aren't the only ones who are struggling this time of year. So, educators give so much. Here we're just talking about their role in helping students navigate this challenging times, but they may also be experiencing burnout or compassion fatigue and just the other life experiences that we all face. And how can school leaders help?
Well, I think educators are some of the most compassionate and resilient people that we know,
Absolutely.
right? Like they pour their heart and soul into the work they do, into the support for their students. But burnout and compassion fatigue is very real, especially, at the end of the semester, the month of December. They have their own holiday stressors that they're experiencing, as well as academic pressures of ending a semester, for example. But for school leaders, I think there's several things they can do. Regularly just check in with their staff, right? Like ask them, how are you today? Not just how was your student? How are you doing? How can I help you? They can create staff listening circles so that staff can share with one another and get support from one another with their challenges that they may all be experiencing. And then I think, too, to model and promote boundaries. So oftentimes, especially, in schools where I mentioned there's all these extra activities that often happen in the month of December. But if we have a staff member or an educator who's especially stressed during that month, I think it's okay to encourage them to let you know where their limits are insofar as their ability to participate in all of these different activities. So I think when an administrator models that for their staff, that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I think for our leaders, having those touch points that Kim was kind of talking about, like authentically checking in with your teachers is really important, because they also need to be heard. Mm-hmm. Right? They also need to be regulated, because if they're not supported and regulated, it's going to impact our students. And so taking care of their well-being is really, really important. And creating an environment where they can come to you as a leader, right? They know that it's okay. Like a teacher can be down and upset, and they know where to go. Right. And you can provide that support during that time. And also, I think it's important to provide some education, because sometimes I think as teachers, you may think, oh, you have to just, keep it all in. You have to keep it together. And it doesn't have to always be like that. It's okay for you to, break down, ask for support, because you're navigating a lot in these classrooms. And to the education piece around knowing like what does that look like for individuals, because sometimes you may not even know, right? Like I just recently saw, oh, when I'm really stressed, my muscles and my like body is really tight, right? But that was a brand new insight I got. But it's like supporting them and educating, like this is what this might look like, so that they get it too.
And I feel like there's so many things that people can do. And one of the, as we all know, outcomes of COVID was that we're talking about mental health a lot more. And what are some of, little things that people can do throughout the day as they're maybe feeling these feelings of stress or challenge and trying to navigate it?
I think little things that an educator can do throughout the day, even when they're in front of their students, right? Like, take those slow, deep breaths. You can always, face the corner if you need to and just take a big, deep breath. It helps to center us. Even something as simple as taking a nice drink of water can help you in that particular moment. You can get the class involved in these activities too. We just talked about how the holidays can be stressful for kids, right? Like, put on one of those brief classroom yoga videos and do some stretches together. Practice your belly breathing together as a class. And you get your own self-care in while you're also helping your students.
Yeah, definitely. I use the concept shake it off. Having your students just get up like every 15 minutes, just for like 2-3 minutes to just like regulate their body. I think is really helpful.
Yeah. Seems like crazy the days where we thought they just had to sit through class for
Right?
hours on end without moving, right? They're little.
Yeah.
They need to move.
Yeah, they do.
And I think having like listening circles in the classroom too is a great way also to cope. So you can start your day with that. Just a quick check-in around the circle where everybody in the room can just say how they're feeling that day, maybe something they're looking forward to or something to reset. It doesn't have to be very involved. It can be very brief, doesn't take much time. And then it can be used at any point during the day. If you see the class is becoming dysregulated, you can do a quick circle. And, it really helps the kids to feel more connected, also to the teacher, and it helps them get through the rest of their day.
And they're modeling in so many ways to the students, right?
Yeah, introducing it to them young, right? And some skills that they can use throughout their professional life as well as they grow older.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we get near to the end of the show, I definitely want to touch on a really important topic, which is suicide prevention. It's also a time of year where that becomes something that, unfortunately, we do need to talk more about. And for whatever reason, and maybe you can shed some light on this, people are afraid of the topic, and yet it does seem like it's something, just like I said about mental health, where finally we're talking about, but we also need to be talking about suicide prevention. Why don't we talk about that, and how can we make that something that is more visible so it can be prevented?
Yeah. I think it's a heavy topic, and there's still a lot of feelings and thoughts and around that topic, right? And how do you introduce it? How do you talk about it? Because it is a heavy topic. And we know that youth who commit suicide, there's a lot of isolation, right? And so how can we prevent that from happening is creating these communities within our classroom where peers can support each other because they trust each other the most, right? And how do we create that environment? And to normalize, right? It's okay to have bad days, and it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to talk about it. I think talking about it with somebody that you trust, it's really important because it helps you get it out a little bit. So providing more of those prevention and not waiting until the word you have to talk about it and it's really heavy. Don't wait till that crisis moment.
And I think to piggyback on that, a lot of people fear that talking about suicide or asking somebody if they're, feeling that they have suicidal thoughts, perhaps, they worry that may cause someone to have suicidal thoughts. When in fact, research is very clear, this does not cause somebody to have suicidal thoughts. What it does is it opens the door for that person to share their thoughts and their feelings about maybe having suicidal thoughts, but maybe about other concerns as well. And that gives us the opportunity to intervene. And so I think people often get very afraid of what do I say, what do I do if I think this might be an issue. And I think our advice would be, it's okay to just ask them directly. I'm hearing you say this, or I heard you say this. Can you tell me more about that? Or are you thinking of hurting yourself? Have you been thinking that you no longer want to live anymore? Those questions are okay to ask, because there might be the only questions that'll get that student to answer it honestly.
I'm so glad you shared that. And it all goes back to relationships, doesn't
Yes,
it? And
absolutely.
talking to each other, checking in. So we're lucky in LA County because there are a lot of resources and partnerships that are available to schools. Can you share a little bit about that? Like what resources can people have that they can maybe access for students who lose their access to other supports even during the week of break?
I would say using the suicide prevention hotline, 988. It gives you, direct access to somebody live that you can speak with, and they can help you connect to additional services if need be. Also in Department of Mental Health, we have our access line, which is 1-800-854-7771, which is also there to provide a variety of different resources. But also I would say, within our school communities, there are mental health providers now, more so than, I would say 10 years ago.
Sure.
And knowing who they are, making connections, bringing them into your classroom so students feel like they can go to them when something is bothering them. So, leveraging the resources within the school community is also important.
I think that's a really good point, because if students and families have more familiarity with the organization or the agency, they're more likely to reach out. I think I would also add that when we talk to students and families about the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline, for example, to let them know that you don't have to have suicidal thoughts to call this lifeline, right? Yeah. And they will connect teens, for example, to our teen crisis line, which is a wonderful resource for kids who are struggling. And I think for our schools, too, to be mindful, again, of the other holiday stressors that our families are having. And so maybe providing them a one-pager that goes out electronically or on paper that includes organizations that donate toys, food, clothing, all sorts of resources that those families may need over this winter break, including parks and recreation, school libraries, etc., places where their children and youth can go to be safe when school is out. And they'll be supervised and have activities that are fun and where they can continue to form connections.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. It's just such an important topic, one that we need to talk about more. And, whether this season feels heavy or joyful, remember that connection and compassion make a difference. So take care of yourself, everyone. Check in on others and remind your students and colleagues they are not alone. If you or someone you know is struggling, you can always reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for free, confidential support 24/7. For further resources, you can also visit www.lacoe.edu or dmh.lacounty.gov. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please follow the Los Angeles County Office of Education on Instagram and YouTube at Los Angeles COE. That's Los Angeles COE. Or you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Los Angeles County Office of Education.